Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Robert Plank from DFYpodcast.com, and John R. Miles is here from JohnRMiles.com and PassionStruck.com. Now, John is an author, he's a keynote speaker, and he's an entrepreneur who blends practical wisdom with relatable anecdotes. And he makes these complex ideas about health, wellness, and personal mastery both accessible and inspiring and aspiring too. And he has a podcast and a book called Passion Struck. Now, this podcast is one of the world's leading shows, and it's the #1 alternative health podcast. So John covers everything, right? Now we can focus on the mind and the body and be our best selves. And John has a background from the U.S. Navy. He's had senior executive roles in Fortune 50 and software CEO roles. So he is a voice on leadership and personal growth. So much to talk about. John, nice meeting you.
Hey, Robert. So happy to be here and so honored to serve your audience.
Well, likewise, we're both excited to you and I work together to serve that audience. And we read your bio, super impressed, so many different facets. Like we all have these layers, but in your own words, what's happening right now? What's your current focus, your passion? What gets you super excited to just jump out of bed in the morning?
Man, I am so lucky. I get to live what I love to do, but it didn't start out that way. About, I would say 13 years ago now, I started to get this calling that the path that I was on wasn't the one that was going to bring me ultimate fulfillment. And like many people, I think I ignored it because it was so foreign to what I was doing at the time. But I am so glad I got the wake up call about 7 years ago. And since then, I have really been on this tunnel focused mission to go out and help people learn how to live lives that truly matter.
Wonderful. And this is a scary thought, and it's so obvious hiding in plain sight, this idea that our mind wants to keep us comfortable and safe, and something that can be a new adventure and opportunity, it can be really good for us, especially in the long term. But in the immediate short term, it's new and it's scary, and our mind finds ways to talk us out of it, to keep it safe, and we just tell ourselves all these weird stories. So now you really have my curiosity. What the heck happened 7 years ago to change things for you?
Man, it was not a story I would want to relive. I had really two major events hit me in a period of under a week. The first happened in November of 2017, and I had gone to the gym that day after dropping my daughter off at school. And it was just like any typical day, except this day at the gym, they happened to have an electrical fire. So we went home early, and unbeknownst to me, there were some individuals who were canvassing my house and had known that I was out of it during certain periods of the day and had chose that day to go into my house and rob me. And so I came back to the house earlier than expected and went upstairs to change because I decided I was going to go for a bike ride instead of the gym. And as I started going up the stairs, my spidey senses started to kick off that something was wrong. And as I was coming around the corner, I started hearing deep breathing and I realized I wasn't alone. And at that point, my military training kind of kicked in to go into kind of a duck routine as I was coming around the corner to observe what was happening. And I came face to face with an intruder pointing a gun at me. And in those moments that you have to react, your life flashes before you. And it really came down to two options. Either I could, at that point in point blank range, charge the stairs and try to take him out, or I could try to evade and live for another day. And I ended up choosing the latter, ended up going out the back of the house. He ended up going out the front of the house. And it was a real wake up call. And then, unfortunately, about 5 days later, one of my closest friends unfortunately committed suicide. And so it was two major things that happened that took me a while to process. But what they really showed was that I had been spending so much of my life making others' dreams come true, making money for other people. Yet I really hadn't pursued this inner calling that I had gotten at that point about 7 or 8 years before that. And I decided from that point forward, I was going to live my life completely differently.
Wow, that's amazing that these two incidents kind of made you when you realize life is short and that it's sometimes easy to get on a path and it's okay to make others' dreams come true, but if you're still not getting what you want, maybe it's your turn to get some of the benefits. And so what did that lead to? What did you then build and what have you created since?
Yeah, Robert. So as you brought up, I am now running a podcast in the alternative health space, health podcast. And I would have told you, looking back, I would never would have thought in a million years would I be hosting a health podcast. And I get this a lot, even from podcasters who are in my specific uh, component of health and wellness. And the journey really started by me going to see a therapist because at this time, not only was I going through the recovery of the trauma, but I was also fairly burned out. And he really gave me this clear analogy that my life as I was currently living it was as if I was on a stool that had one major support underneath it. And for me, that was really a stool of the constant burnout or the constant busyness or hecticness or achievement that I felt like I was compelled to do. And he said, you've got a choice. You can live your life sitting on a stool that has multiple supports. You can pick what they are, but you can make yourself a lot more well rounded and put yourself in a completely different state. So I took his wisdom and I decided that for me, those pillars were going to be physical health, emotional health, mental health, spiritual health, and relationship health. And so I started to rebuild my life around those pillars. And the first one, given what had just happened, that I really doubled down on was mental health and making sure that I could free myself from the stuck points that were holding me back. And I think what people don't understand is oftentimes we think we need to have confidence or courage to take action. And it's the exact inverse. You gain courage, you gain confidence by taking action. And I think we overthink how large the action needs to be. It really can be small choices that we make that compound over time. And what I have found is you can start in any pillar of your life, and ultimately, changes that you make there will promulgate to other components of your life as well.
That's a great message, and that's very deep and powerful to think about. That it's it's such a cop out to, as you said, wait for the confidence to then take action, but you take action and then even a small action, and you get the confidence from what happens, and then there's that feedback loop. Then because you took action and got confidence, you can take more action, and then it continues on. It's not just a one-shot deal, and that's also a great insight you had of kind of looking at your life wheel, so to speak, right? And looking at what are those different areas of like mental health and physical health. And as guys like you and I know, all these goal setting and achievement, it doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't if you don't take the time to think about what you want and what you're focusing on, then you might end up with some kind of haphazard chaos that we talked about. And so something that I think about a lot is this idea of the controlled chaos or the short bursts of maybe panic or productivity, and somehow using that instead of it using you, because it is good to have all the supports and to have the calmness and everything, but man, sometimes I just really want to like bust out 50 videos, or I want to go on 100 Zoom calls. So do you ever think about that, on how of course it's bad to always be having the chaos and the hecticness, but sometimes you want to really focus and buckle down and get some things done. So how do you maybe switch gears, and how do you really just harness the nuclear bomb of wanting to get so much done?
Yeah. So as I was writing my book, I ended up studying about 750 different luminaries, everything from professional athletes to CEOs, from actors and actresses to military generals and admirals. And one of the things I found across all of them is that they're constantly trying to reinvent themselves. And there's this constant push to be better. But I also found that there were periods of time when they're really making an intense push where they're putting the vehicle, let's say, into hyperdrive to get over that specific goal that they want to accomplish. But what they all then tend to do is also create a period of downtime where they can reset themselves from those bursts of energies or burst of accomplishment. So they get a rest period to free themselves for more creativity and to think about what's strategically going to be their next steps.
I love it. I think all the time about like what are my four quadrants, right? Or like what are the if there's four seasons, what season am I currently in? And so I like that. So you're saying that maybe when it's time to really like work hard, that is when we're in pursuit of a goal. But then after the goal is accomplished, then have the kind of downtime and have those periods of deciding, well, what am I doing to reinvent? Or what are my next steps? And like you hear all these sorts of things like, every year or two, you should be like completely redoing your website. Or if you put out content or podcasts or social media, that you should make these videos or make this content that just reintroduces who you are, what you want to be known for, because it's so easy to kind of go down a path, and next thing you know, like you're talking about all sorts of like advanced, talking about the alternative health space, you're getting in all kinds of advanced topics when maybe it could be time to get back to the bare essentials, the bare basics. And so you've got this book where you kind of talk about like these 12 different modes, and you have this podcast, and so you've done all these. You talk about like the 750 studies, so you've seen so many things, right? And so when it comes to all these aspects of alternative health, is there any sort of lesson that really stands out to you, or something that maybe is not discussed enough these days that should be?
Yeah. So one of the things that I anchor my book on are three important components that I think drive self realization. And two of these are building blocks that Angela Duckworth wrote about in her book, Grit. So one is passion, the other is perseverance. And let me explain this through her book and through my own personal story. So at the beginning of her book, she discusses how cadets at West Point were able to get through Beast Barracks, and then they've updated this in 2019 to getting through all 4 years at West Point. And they found that it was physical ability, passion, and perseverance. And I happen to graduate from the Naval Academy, so I have some firsthand knowledge here. And putting myself in that same situation, physical ability, you definitely had to have because of the arduous different training programs that you'd have to go through. That said, I think if you were mentally strong enough and you were willing to push yourself, you could still get through. You absolutely have to have passion to want to devote a life to serving your country and to take the steps to do it. And given all the hurdles that they throw at you, you definitely need to persevere. But there was one key component of the triangle that I don't think they captured, and that is the importance of being intentional in our life. Meaning, you can have all the passion and perseverance and physical abilities that you want. I mean, a ton of athletes have this, but if they're not intentional about the training regimen, about having the courage to push themselves forward, to take the next steps, to get over self doubt, whatever it may have you, they never reach that elite level. And the same thing happens to each of us in our life. Intentionality is also that thing that tells us when we're taking a detour that's leading us astray from our long term ambitions and aspirations, having the self control to recognize it and to make changes that get us back on the path so that we're aligning our actions with where we want to be to become our future self.
Wonderful. So we need that intention, as you say, to deal with all the mental problems that come our way, right? Persevering, maybe those days that we don't feel like doing something, making decisions of what to do, what not to do. And we definitely need that intention for those times that we're thrown off course and have to make a detour and figure out a way back, because it's so easy to plateau after a while, right? It's so easy to just let things settle or tell yourself you're tired or you've reached the end point, and we have to really push ourselves and be rethinking about these goals and about our intention and what we've done and what it means, and surround ourselves with these support systems, and especially read excellent books like yours and listen to excellent podcasts such as yours. That way we can get the continuous good knowledge fed into us in all these different aspects and areas of life. And so you're the expert here as far as all these subjects, right? Leadership and personal growth, health and wellness. And I want to make sure that we really cover maybe the missing question here. So could there be a question that maybe you wish I'd asked you here, John? And can we just pretend that maybe I asked you and you answer it for me?
So I'm going to give a quote that I think is pretty profound, that I think the listeners should really take in heart and think about how this applies to their life. Buddhist philosopher Dasuku Ikeda has this quote: "What is defeat in life? It's not merely making a mistake. Defeat means giving up on yourself in the midst of difficulty. What is true success in life? True success means winning the battle with yourself. Those who persist in their pursuit of their dreams, no matter what the hurdles, are winners in life, for they have won over their weaknesses." And something I love to tell people is the greatest person that you will ever meet in your entire life is the person who stares back at you in the mirror. However, the greatest competitor that you will ever meet in your life is that same person. And it's our quest in life that if we want to achieve becoming the best ideal self that we possibly can be, it's really winning over our own weaknesses and learning how to overcome ourself to achieve what we aspire to dream.
That's wonderful. And that's very powerful. These ideas that we are the person that we'll spend the most time with and the person that we'll talk to the most, and will probably, if we're not careful, be the person that we deliver the most negativity to, and the person that we say some nasty things that we would never say to anyone else. So the choice is up to us. And if you assign the blame to someone else, and you put the control to some external force, then that's not helping you at all. And it's time to take that ownership and take responsibility and check out the Passion Struck book and podcast. That way we can persevere, as you say, and to just win this game of life, which, if I'm understanding correctly, means to persist on and to not give up, because as long as we're still in the game, that means that things are still working for us. But if we admit defeat and we just surrender and give up and stop with our dreams and goals, then that's not a life at all. And so what are some next steps here, John? If someone is really impressed with what you came here with and what you had to say, and they say, I want to check you out as a keynote speaker, the podcast, the book, what are some next steps? Where do we go?
Yeah, Robert, that's very kind of you to ask me about that. So the book just released on February 6th, so it's brand new, and you can find it wherever you purchase books. The easiest place would be Amazon, but it's at bookshop.org, Walmart, Target. You can also read about it at passionstruck.com/passionstruckbook. The podcast is also everywhere that you listen to podcasts, and I've recently had some phenomenal guests this week, including Jamie Kern-Lima, Charles Duhigg about his new book, and Harry Budamagar, who many of the listeners might not know about. He's a former Gurkha soldier who stepped on an IED, lost both of his legs above his knees, and the interview really tells his inspiring story of becoming passion struck, taking back his life, and he just climbed Everest. He's the first person who had a double amputee above his knee to ever climb Everest. And so I love to showcase everyday heroes like that who are just making tremendous change in the world. In his case, showing people with disabilities that they can do whatever their mind believes that they can achieve in life.
Amazing and wonderful. And you know what, John, when I was younger, I didn't appreciate the value of like the personal story, right? And it's all too easy to learn the keywords, the buzzwords, the lessons, hear these phrases like time management, etc. But then what I've noticed from your guest appearance here is you've really put in a lot of your personality and your experience and your stories. And that's the fun of podcasting. And that seems to be a lot of the fun of your show and the guests that you have. Is like sometimes I mean, that's amazing. I mean, Charles Duhigg, that's an amazing get for your show. And sometimes we go to listen to podcasts because we say, man, there's that really big name. There's that person I've really heard of. But then there's also the unexpected gems. And there's someone that you might have never heard of has this just amazing story that you can really relate relate to and get kind of drawn into, and it can really help you out. And that's just the fun of the randomness of podcasting, of the unexpected stories and the unexpected guests. And so if you out there are a podcast listener, which you should be, you're listening to this show, check out John R. Miles' very excellent show at passionstruck.com. And then that book is at passionstruck.com/passionstruckbook. And it's been very wonderful and just thought-provoking talking to you, John. People need to check out your podcast and book, and I really appreciate you.
Yeah, Robert, thank you so much for having me. It's always such an honor to be on another person's podcast. I really appreciate it.